Welcome into Other People's Shoes, the podcast where listeners get to step into the lives of others and see the world through their shoes. Your host, Neil Matthews, is a seasoned interviewer who has a natural talent for empathizing with his guests and drawing out their unique perspectives. Through a combination of storytelling and insightful questioning, Other People's Shoes explores the lives of a diverse range of guests, from everyday people to celebrities and thought leaders. With a warm and welcoming style, Neil creates a safe and supportive space for his guests to share their stories, while also challenging listeners to broaden their perspective and think more deeply about the world around them. So tune in to Other People's Shoes with Neil Matthews and get ready to step into other people's shoes.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. You ready to lace them up? You ready to get back out there? Well, I am. I hope you are as well. Here we are, season 14. Where has the time gone? Yeah, that's right, 14 now. I had somebody stop me at church the other day. They said, hey, that podcast thing, are you still doing that? Is that still a thing you do? I was like, listen, this is in my DNA. This is who I am. And so I thought, what a better way to really dig into more of our stories, more of our life, if we had this unveiling moment. Now, listen, most of my ideas, to be candid, come anywhere between midnight and 3 a.m. That is, I think, when the cultivating and the enriching and the brewing of ideas transpires. So no, I didn't have any dream. But I do believe this is a little bit inspired by one of my favorite musical artists right now. NF, maybe you guys have heard of him. He's pretty amazing. He has a new album out called Hope. Go check it out. Pretty awesome. I'm not getting paid to say that. He's just amazing. And I'd love to sit with him one day. So those of you who may know him, help me out. But in that, his very first song, the title song, Hope off of his album, he talks about almost like this mask, this revealing of who he's been, an unveiling of this life that he thought he had. And now it has been completely different. So with all that said, I think it's only fitting that we stay in the Tar Heel state for a couple of these first episodes. I feel like we haven't left North Carolina from the jump because we started in North Carolina. Second episode was in North Carolina. Third episode, well, you'll have to go back and listen to that one. But the fourth episode now, in our fourth episode of this season, we're back in North Carolina. So we're just camping out there. We just got our RV out there. It's awesome. Help me welcome in my new friend, Matthew. Matthew, how are you today?
Hey, what's up, Neil? I'm psyched to be here, man. I know we're going to vibe already.
What an introduction, right?
Yeah, that was big. Hey, congrats on 13 full seasons. That's a good run.
Right? 4 years.
Man, most people don't even make it 4 episodes.
I heard when I first started, if you make it to 7, you'll make it forever. And I was like, I don't know about that.
You got to really feel it. It is one of the few things that does come down to how bad you want it.
Well, we were talking in the green room that sometimes it takes sacrifice. It takes that idea of getting up early when no one else wants to get up early, and you do things when no one else wants to do it. Think of the late Kobe Bryant. He was always talking about getting in these workouts before no one else even was there. Yeah. And he said he was like 7 hours ahead of every other guy, 8 hours ahead, sometimes 12 hours ahead of every other guy. And I'm thinking, over a lifetime, over a season, over all of that, no wonder he's one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've heard him give that speech. He said it beautifully. It resonates for me with every creative project. I'm like, the only difference between me and anyone else is not that I'm better at this. It's just that I'm willing to get home from my full-time job and do another full-time job.
I don't think people realize that when they get into podcasting. Maybe that's why they only make it to 7. So who knows? Matt, are we going to go Matt? Can I do Matt, or Matthew is the given? We're sticking with that. Mom and Dad would be sad if we went with Matt. I don't know. Help me with that.
Matt is what people generally call me unless they're trying to really stand out.
It's weird because Matthews is my last name, and I had friends teasing me and growing up, they said, if you ever have a son, you should name him Matt. And I'm like, Matt Matthews? That is terrible. Nobody wants that.
I feel like people used to do that all the time, though. They would first name their child with zero regard for how it rolled with the last name. Get these John Johnsons. Or it's like, did you just not? Well, I guess that ends up being a family name, and maybe they still revere the original John. Jeffries. You didn't think about it?
Nobody thinks about it. That's the problem. That's our problem. That's our problem with the world today. Nobody's really thinking. But let's talk about you, because I believe, and I truly really say this with all sincerity. I believe you're going to kind of cause us to think today, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes we got to think outside the box. We got to think outside the neighborhood. We got to think outside of maybe what we've always thought about and have this great reveal moment, if you will. So before we get to there, Matt, help me with this because I love to ask this question. What size shoes do you wear?
Generally like a 10 or 11. My feet are closer to a 10. They're a weird shape. So 11 is usually what I have to wear to fit without it hurting my toes.
All right. Now the most important question of all time, the style and brand that Matt likes to wear the most.
Lately, I've been wearing these dirt cheap shoes that I forget why, but like I had to buy a certain style of shoes because I just didn't have anything that was between casual and formal. And I just needed it for something. And I bought these shoes that were on clearance at Target. They were like kind of like Vans style, but basically made of rubber or something. They were awesome. And then I went back and bought the same ones in every other color they had. They were just working for me. Maybe that's not the usual answer, but I like my cheap, what are they called? Goodfellow shoes. I like wearing some good high tops though too. You know, I got a variety.
Is there 80 pairs in Matt's closet? Asking for a friend.
No zero. Yeah.
No zero, just strictly 8.
Yeah, something like that. The number of completion.
I probably have 8 just in this room. I have a problem. I'm trying to get help, you guys. I really am. There's a guy that is helping me, not with the shoe issue. So Matt, when you heard about this mask idea, now there's a lot of things that come to mind. A lot of people have reached out. A lot of people have said, okay, let's clarify. What are we talking about a mask? And my thought is maybe there's a truth that has been hidden, which is one idea. Or maybe there is this thing that is in my life that I kept hidden. Again, maybe a truth, or maybe something that I was scared about sharing with people, or maybe just a lot of people didn't know about. And so we kind of had to hide it away. It's this idea of hiding something and then it being revealed. Do you have anything like that that comes to mind?
Yeah, plenty of things. I mean, my personality in general. This might sound a little weird. Vulnerability is my thing, not by nature. The idea of peeling back the layers and getting to the bottom of something, laying it all out. Some people are adrenaline junkies, and I am tear back the veil junkie. That's what I wake up every day, just hoping to have a conversation that just cuts to the core of it. I also have a deep protective instinct. I think it's because of that, and because I did the painful thing, not just on one occasion, but just in general, was I realized that I was not going to feel any gratification if I didn't work past that. So I went from being a very protective person of myself, kind of figured out how to be open and vulnerable. And that's my thing now.
Maybe centering around that is you go out and write this book. My thought is that, and listen, let me just be candid here. I'll kind of put myself on the table here, the examining table. Usually we're at a coffee table, but maybe today we're at an examining table. So examine me in this. If we were friends and I said to you, you know what, Matt, I've been thinking about writing a book, but my problem is I'm afraid nobody's going to, one, read it, two, care to even think about hearing my words in a book form. There's a struggle there for me because I think to myself, who would ever want to read it? Did you ever encounter any of those thoughts, those invasive thoughts that says, listen, nobody's gonna really care about your book, Matt?
Yeah, all the time. I've done a lot of different creative things over the years, and they generally have fallen flat. When I started out doing those things, it came from a place of sincere creativity to where I wasn't afraid of it, of like rejection on an ego level where like it's gonna really hurt if people don't love it. I started like making movies before social media or anything, so I wasn't counting likes. I wasn't wired that way. It was always a fairly intrinsic process. And then the more effort I started putting into individual productions, whether it was writing or filming or whatever, I ended up wanting more of that. Be like, if I'm going to invest this much time, this much energy, be this open, all right, this one better land. And it continued to not do so, which has been very frustrating. It's disappointing. It doesn't create insecurity. It just makes me question, so what do I have to offer? Do these things fall flat? When that crossed my mind, I prepared myself for that. Negative feedback would be a lot worse than no feedback, I think. But I was like, if that is the case, Matt, are you prepared to move forward, find a different avenue in life? And what option is there? I guess that's an inspiration to write it honestly, because I wouldn't want to then have to look at it and say, well, what could I have maybe said better, done differently? Instead, it's just, well, I absolutely put out all that I could, laid it all on the table, and so be it.
When I'm looking at the cover, by the way, the book is called Swept Up, Lessons from the End Times. You're not supposed to judge a book by its cover. You're supposed to judge it by its content. Somebody once said to me.
Well, we all judge them by covers, I think.
I'm looking at the cover, and by the way, it intrigues me already. I want to know the story behind this young little boy. I mean, he looks to be maybe 5 to 7. 9 seems too old. 5 to 7 seems...
Yeah, definitely close to 5, I think.
Okay. guy.
is spot on, yeah.
That's what it feels like to me, at least in looking at him. And he's wearing this kind of, not really a baseball cap, maybe like one of those old golf hats, if you will.
I think it came out of a McDonald's Happy Meal, that hat. if that was a color image, you'd be shocked by the colors in that hat.
I love that it's black and white, though. I do enjoy that because to me, it allows my imagination to fill in said colors. I believe he's sitting in a sycamore tree. I don't know why, but maybe that's why.
Like Zacchaeus.
Exactly. What I thought about too. He seems very lonely and sad. Am I reading too much into a book cover? Help me with that.
Well, I would agree that looking at it on at face value, he does look kind of lonely and sad. In reality, my brother was probably standing less than 10 feet away and we were in the middle of playing. I had very pensive expression, which when I found that photo, I was like, that is one of the better expressions of how I actually felt. Not so much lonely, except in that I felt very different from the mainstream, maybe more so as I got older. At that point, there was definitely a weight of concepts and worries that most kids at that age would not be burdened with. That was probably around the time I was starting to sense like, oh, this isn't just that I'm interested in these things, it's that something's wrong with me and I can't stop thinking about these things. And I was starting to develop neurotic tics and things like that. Yeah, right around that age that you're looking at there. That was kind of an interesting time.
So that brings a new element. That's you in the book cover?
Yeah, that is me on the front and the back. The back has a little bit more comedic value, I think. And it is referenced in the book. That is me.
I thought just based on the photo itself, it seemed very old time and maybe some artistry had gone into that. I didn't realize that was you sitting on the tree. That's interesting. But why write the book? What's your thought process of putting it out there? Why should folks go out and grab a copy?
The audience that I had in mind was people who, especially those who grew up in the same era, which was the 90s. Anyone really who I think has had this experience of being in church and taking a lot of things just as it was presented, internalized something from that was probably not meant to be conveyed, like was terrified of what was supposed to be a liberating and life-giving message. You received what your parents believed as something absolutely horrible. There are people with many different types of traumatic experiences in church, but mine was completely subjective. I was surrounded by good and loving people who ended up communicating something that caused me, or at least activated, some severe anxiety. Maybe they didn't even grow up in church, but they get the 90s experience, or they're just fascinated by the sheer spectacle of a kid describing being homeschooled. They read about my experience and they're like, you grew up in a cult. And I'm like, no, I didn't. To some people, it may sound that way as well if you're totally unfamiliar with it. The reason really that I thought this needs to be told is that there are so many people who had exactly the same sort of, at least, effects from a church experience, their upbringing in general. They tend to go one of two directions, which is either they just keep it bottled forever and they keep the identity factors. It's sort of comfortable, but they don't think about it too deeply. Or they are so jaded, they cite abuse, which in some cases is very true, but they don't know some people just don't know what other label to put on it. And so they end up really resentful about the church. In sort of this middle ground, that the people I grew up with are all still my friends. We all still sense that there is a meaningful spiritual existence of some sort. There's some kind of outside force, and some are more devoted to evangelical Christianity than others, where it's not something to just stop thinking about and say, well, that was all only one thing and a bad thing. I try to be very nuanced about it. I sort of oscillate between comedic retelling of the life I had and then narrating the thought process of being terrified by it or of trying to figure out, what is this life? My life had a huge question mark on it. I was just always asking questions. So I try to sort of narrate that mindset. And again, I think there's a lot of people who really relate to that. The stories, I don't find them to be told very often. I was inspired by at least one other book in a similar vein and was like, yeah, I gotta tell this too, because I think there's both a constructive way of responding to it and self-bettering beyond any deconversion or deconstruction that you experience. And there's also things that people who are still well within the church should look at and say, is this healthy? Is this a sustainable and honest belief?
You mentioned that somebody says something to you to activate this kind of direction, if you will, this kind of path, maybe hands you a compass and say, no, it's that way. What was said. And then it feels like the elephant in the room. What was so tragic, painful, scarring that now has you on the path, the trajectory you're currently on?
To describe the general vibe, my church was a lot of people who were very devout. Not just like we go to church once a week because that's kind of the stable American thing to do. It was people who were like really serious about a doctrine that could guide their lives. Non-denominational, but that therein lies the ability to kind of construct a hegemony of sorts. This is what we believe. So it becomes its own denomination in a sense. One of the prevailing doctrines was, as with many churches, we all go to heaven or hell. That is eternal. The rapture is coming very soon. For us who were kids at that time, that was a terrifying prospect. And it was almost as if something was being celebrated that was to us a fatal diagnosis. I don't know what caused me and a couple of my peers to be so much more upset by the idea of the afterlife in general than other kids from other churches I've talked to. But we were consumed by that thought. Even the idea of heaven, it made us sick. With regard to that, I don't know what was exactly said that caused us to think like linear eternity. That's hell, no matter what. We all thought that, even though I can't point to like, here's why that hit us so hard. You do the math and it's like, well, okay, that is what's being taught in most churches as a foundational point. I don't know how you introduce to a kid the idea of the hereafter. It's an existential crisis, whether you're taught it in theological terms or not. But we went straight for eternal terror. And then within years, while we're still kids, to hear, well, based on current events, we only have months left, did me in. I didn't believe I was going to grow up. And I think that reshaped my entire view of life and the world, caused kind of a trickle effect that never quite stopped. Again, I say that trauma is a very subjective thing. There were not only adults, but kids my age who also were like all aboard, all on it, and not at all troubled by that. That's why I feel like what I'm trying to express is that even within something that is positive for many people, it's worth considering if it's so certain and so honest that it would be worth the fallout if that fallout is damaging to somebody. Or I could give other examples on a world scale of how religious beliefs could come with different kind of baggage as well.
I graduated in 1999. I'm 43. I was a 90s kid, grew up in the church. I was an Awana kid. I walked the aisle, Southern Baptist Church, 9 years old. I'm getting baptized. I know scripture only because I have a really good memory and I can kind of memorize stuff real quick. And if I hear it generally enough times, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. And they say blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's just kind of how God's wired me, for the record. I remember sitting in newspaper class in high school towards the end of my senior year. And I remember thinking to myself, going to church, I grew up in a very older congregation, evangelical congregation, Christian Missionary Alliance congregation. I would one day become an associate pastor there. So, I mean, I have a history with this church. And in all that, I remember this vivid moment of sitting in newspaper class, probably writing an article for whatever sports team that I was covering at that moment. And I remember thinking, am I going to graduate? Because again, it's 99, 2000's on the horizon. Y2K was a thing. People don't know that, but it was a thing.
Yeah. Oh, big thing. No, that was where it started.
That was where it was at. And so I remember having this vivid thought in my brain, truly, like this is jogging it all back for me as you kind of retell your moment. Am I going to graduate? Am I going to marry Elizabeth? Like these are all the things that I'm thinking about. Again, Y2K. And the other thing that comes to mind is you're talking about your faith experience, or we'll say quote unquote religious experience, because I think there's a difference between faith and religion. I feel like religion like bogs you down and puts restrictions and rules, and Jesus came to fulfill the law, not to make our burden even heavier, because he said, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Think of the movie Footloose with Kevin Bacon, and I think of this town that they lived in that they didn't want them to dance, of all stupid things as that was. And that's the whole point of Footloose. If you've never seen it, it's an amazing movie, 80s movie. But in that's what I'm thinking about right now. As I got older, taking apocalyptic classes, that's a big word, which is about the book of Revelation. And I've had conversations with folks who talk about the 7 seals in Revelation, about how all these things have to come to pass. And now I'm hearing, now current day, China and Russia have merged and they're going to have this 1 million man army. And this is falling in line with Revelation. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like what this church did to you, or this faith organization did to you, and maybe your peers, is they scared you guys so much that you're like, we don't want any more. We're done. me and Johnny, we're going out back and we're done.
The weird twist maybe is that we were, at least for a while, inclined to grip it even tighter. We need the security of, well, if heaven and hell are the only options, let's at least make sure we're saved. The effect wasn't just, oh, these kids were terrified, that's awful, they need to get over their trauma. It was that we viewed the world through a very black and white lens, which is exactly the law that you're describing Jesus came to replace. So it ended up being antithetical to what I would say is real Christianity. The essence of the experience that I'm trying to describe is where the entire concept of a spiritual worldview is poisoned by a religious worldview, which I believe is conveyed with sincere and sometimes loving intent. They're looking out for your soul. These Sunday school teachers who would rather not tell you you might get set on fire, they have to because it's the doctrine that they believe. They're only doing what they feel is best for you. It became for many of us a 20-year process of figuring out baggage in our belief system that's very inconvenient and troubling. We do feel like we've been saved from a horrible fate now that we've survived what we thought was the end times and we're still here. So we better figure out how we're going to live and make it practical. I realized I was still holding it as a security blanket decades later. There were things that I was questioning, feeling horribly guilty about questioning. Something in your intellectual process, we call it belief, but there's different levels of assent that people will hold up as essential. That's how you are granted salvation. It's a very scary thing. Question, and I felt at least as if it sort of robbed me of autonomy. From the start, felt like I was being blackmailed essentially, not by the church, again, literally by God, if that was how it worked. A big part of my journey was trying to reconcile a loving God who I very much believed in with how does this exist or does it exist? This horrible hellscape. Why did God allow suffering and all those other questions that people ask? All the big questions about God were secondary to just making sure we get into heaven. We were very young to be concerned with those things. I just think that really, it alters the timeline for a kid growing up and has some maybe more effects than people realize in the long run.
I grew up in a Southern Baptist kind of hellfire and brimstone speech. I remember quite often growing up in a Baptist church specifically where the guy's wife, the pastor's wife, she was older. She was really old. She's probably in heaven now. Her name's Jewel. His name was Dale, and they're probably both again in heaven because they were old back then. And I'm 43 now. Pastor Dale pounded on his Bible. You gotta repent. You gotta know who Jesus is. You're going to hell if you don't. And I remember as a kid being scared. Truly being scared. Like I was already kind of afraid of the dark, and that just elevated it in my mind. Still am a little bit afraid of the dark nowadays. As I grew up and as I learned more of the Bible on my own and through others helping through discipleship, I started to discover that, listen, there's nothing to be scared about. Be aware of, but not to be scared about. Is that not true in your situation?
I guess I don't understand how there could be nothing to be scared about if you know that the majority of the world is on the fast track to either heaven or hell. Now let's assume, okay, God knows what he's doing. Heaven's not bad. There's still a pipeline of souls dropping into an eternal flambe every second. Irreconcilable if literal to me. So there's both a philosophical question there. Is God still good then kind of question? I don't know. You have to be okay with that. That's just one of many things, but I'll stick it there.
You know, you're in Fayetteville. How far are you from the Triangle? Help me with that because I should know this and I don't.
It's like an hour drive.
Okay, so you're an hour from the Triangle. Triangle, just to help, is Raleigh, Chapel Hill. It's kind of the Triangle, right? That's what they call it out there. Wake's out there too. Die-hard Tar Heels fan. Everyone who has listened to this show knows that. People in my real life know that. Not that this isn't real life. Real life meaning I see them every day. That's what I mean by real life. You know that. We talked about that from the beginning. I have a very near and dear friend of our family. He's in the Marine Corps. Prior to him going in the Marine Corps, he went to Duke for graduate school. And his parents were like, oh, aren't you excited for Eric? He's going to graduate school at Duke. And I'm like, he picked the wrong school. I'm like, what? Yeah. I'm like, listen, Eric's not my friend for the next 4 years or 3 years or however long he's at graduate school. He's not my friend anymore. They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I can't associate with anything in Durham. I won't. And they're like, aren't you taking this fandom thing a little too seriously? I'm like, there is nothing redeeming in my mind about Durham. Nothing. It's just a school. I'm like, to me, it's more than that. I can't stand them.
Are you about to make UNC and Duke a heaven and hell analogy?
Yes,
analogy?
yes, I am. Absolutely, 100%. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. Glad you're laughing because it really is trying to be funny. Duke is the blue devil. It's pretty easy to do, and Coach K looks like the devil incarnate. I'm just saying, all right? He looks like a rat. I'll say it. It's my show. I can say that. And I'm only using that as an analogy because it does fit. I don't want anyone to go to hell. I got relatives, I got people I know that are walking away from quote unquote evangelicalism, even set that aside, walking away from who God is, walking away from who Jesus is. Now, listen, I've had my dark moments too. I've had my valley of the shadow of death. I've been in the doldrums of hell, and there were some amazing people that helped pull me out. One of them is just down the hall, and she's my wife, and you know her because you met her last couple of episodes. But I mean this, I don't want anyone to. I got a brother that's 2 years older than I am. I haven't talked to him and I don't know where he is. Hurts my heart. I want him in my life. I want my big brother. I don't want anyone to go there.
I guess that just raises the question of, is it not still a killer to the marketing pitch? You don't get to create the pitch for a religion that you're saying is the universal truth. Do people continue to believe in that sincerely? I don't know how that's not a non-starter for belief in God. And this isn't like the thing I thought we would get stuck on. I'm just so curious with anybody. How do you get past that?
Going back to my point with Duke, and that is truly why I picked them. And again, I'm only using it as an analogy. I really don't hate people from Duke. I think of it as a choice. Going back to my friend Eric. Eric had a choice. Eric could have gone to graduate school anywhere he wanted. I could say that about someone's salvation. They had a choice to do anything they wanted to do. They chose that. God didn't say, Matt, you're going to hell. No, you chose that. When I hear you say, hey, the church did this or the church did that, listen, I have some church hurt too. I think we all do on some level. We do. Listen, I've talked to a lot of folks that do. But the hard part that I have to come back to, no matter what I do in life, it still comes down to Neil's choice. And maybe this is where we're different. And maybe this is where the different perspective walks in. And I'm welcome to it. Is it not a choice in your mind?
Well, I guess I want to bounce that question back to you because you said it's a choice, but it's also treated as based on belief. I don't think that what you believe is a choice if you're being honest. Belief is only a choice if you're believing for the sake of convenience, assenting to the thing that you like to envision the most. Now, if I was making a choice where I said, in spite of conviction that God is this, I just really want to be a sinner. There are things I want to do that God won't allow me to do, so I'm choosing that. And I think that's a common assumption from inside the church looking out. When someone turns away, it's because they're turning towards something they like more. And for me, even that unmasking and being honest is not because I like it more. That's kind of what I started with. It's uncomfortable. I realize that the end result of feeling like I'm being honest with myself and expressing myself honestly is the only way to be. When somebody like me I keep using it in different contexts, but believes that they are being honest in their belief, do you look at that and say it's tarnished by sin, somehow disingenuous, or that it's lying? You can answer however you want. I'm not going to feel like you're attacking.
Is if you say, hey, I'm going to go do what's something in your mind that would be counter church, that people would say, oh, nope, that's not good. You don't want to do that. What would it be?
Cocaine orgies?
I'm going to go with Michael Irvin, who former football player for Dallas Cowboys, got busted in the 90s, by the way, I believe, with truly that. He was in a hotel room snorting coke off of strippers. Me as an evangelical, I don't even like that word. Me as a disciple of Jesus, like that a whole lot better, but I heard recently, I can't really even say that anymore. But if I'm going to claim Jesus, I don't feel like that Jesus would honor that. I don't think that's what he's saying when he goes be all things to all people. I don't think he says go be a cocaine addict and snort coke off of strippers. I don't think he wants that. I would think of that not only because I am married, that would be sinful. That would be adultery. That would be fulfilling the lust of the flesh. All those things come to mind. I'm sure there would be lying involved because I'd have to lie to people like, oh, I wasn't at the Motel 6 with Coco and Ginger. That to me seems sin, separation from God. God's not going to be honored in that. And that's me choosing, going back to my word, that's me choosing that lifestyle. Hand on the Bible here. I've never done cocaine. Never have, never will. Just seems too scary to me. That to me is a choice I'm not going to make. Not because of my faith per se, because I'm afraid of what cocaine would do to me. Faith does come into play there. The bigger reason is I don't want to be that guy doing drugs. Choice. Right. Not a heaven or hell issue, just a choice.
You're right. And that comes down to what some would call personal conviction, or in other words, honesty and what your goals are. And if you're doing something that isn't for your ultimate betterment or the communal betterment, however your values are structured. But you asked me to pick something that people within the church would look down on as a sin. And now we could talk forever about scenarios where a non-religious person's sense of what is right for them is very much looked down on by the church. Things that are not on that I picked the extreme end of the spectrum there.
Go with one that is a hot button topic right now for most. So I've heard people say homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. In other words, will not go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is homosexual, transgender, won't inherit. That is as sinful. It's an abomination. They will not go. I still think that's a choice.
There's choices involved in any action, of course.
Right.
But then it would have to come from a place of it's a given that God's law was true and directed at me. So if you didn't start from that point, there would be no reason to adhere to every text that might be the true religious law.
So that comes down to the point then, is what is truth? So I would ask you, Matt, what is truth?
Right. So, mentioned a compass earlier. The only compass the highest compass that you can adhere to has to be the one that comes from within yourself, because it's the only one that you even know is autonomous.
Even in myself can deceive me.
Oh, absolutely.
Myself can give bad directions. Myself can look at the compass and be like, "Yeah, we need to go that way." And I'm like, "No, are you sure?" No. I think that could be the struggle. Is what is the truth of it? Is the Bible all the way true? Is the Bible sort of true? Is the Bible not 5% true, 2% true? I had a lady tell me recently that Jesus is a hummingbird. I'm like, what? She's like, well, it says that in the Bible. I'm like, where?
I don't know about that one. When I refer to the compass, I should expand on that just a little bit more. I don't think any of us can point directly at absolute truth. We can each point to where our ambiguous, non-needled compass is directing us to look. So in that sense, it ends up being a shared directive kind of where each of us is forming the opinions that we have based on input from other people, no matter what, no matter who we are. We're at least incorporating things we've experienced through the lens of other people into what we see as true. If there's absolute truth, I don't think there's any way that you even box it up into words. It's always imperfect through the lens of however we express it or point at it. You and I love podcasting. We're going to try to get at those kernels of something that resonates, because that's when you feel that you're closer. You're never all the way there. Theoretical and hopefully somewhere in the extra natural proposition that you'd arrive at that. But we are here on a quest. When anything is, again, put into law, that's a way of saying, to some people, it's a way of saying this is the absolute truth. We can fit it in words. But I think the proper way of looking at it as complementary to spirit, we, at the end of the day, have to make choices. Those choices are in the general direction of what we humbly recognize the light is over there.
Is there absolute truth?
I think there has to be. Nothing that you could articulate and say, we arrived, this is a piece of absolute truth.
Fair enough. Somebody asked me once, describe my love for my wife. There are not enough words to really, truly express that. I try all the time. Feel like I fall short. I feel like that's absolute truth to me, is like trying to describe something that nobody's ever seen, nobody's ever touched, nobody's ever really truly felt. I've gotten close, but not ever really full on jacket on, like, oh yeah, that's warm, that's truth, that's what that is. The only thing close I've ever come to truly is the Bible. And that is where my compass and that is where my lenses get lined up with. Now, there are those that would say outdated, bigotry, sexism, whatever it may be, wrong, judgmental, all these things that are associated with the Bible. So for you, where do you find that absolute truth?
In accepting that I don't really have it, except, I think, and I agree with, is that feelings bring us the closest to it. Experience might be considered absolute. Consciousness, I think, is otherworldly. So it's like that's what we feel the most through consciousness is these emotions, these senses. I guess that's what meditation is too. So when I'm having an experience that is transcendental, ethereal, that's all that I can hope for in a given moment. I can hope for something else that's like a product of that on the other side or whatever it is. I'm not going to live for that when I only have the here and now placed in front of me and in me through me.
That our greatest struggle right now is language, is speaking the same language. Even though you and I right now, some would say we are both speaking English. And right, we are. But I think our terminology and our word choice are completely different.
Yeah. Well, you run into that exact problem when somebody talks about their lived experience, because then they have to translate it into words. And that part can get whack. And they're trying to be honest. We can even only express our own selves imperfectly. I think you already said that before. And that's exactly right.
I have to go back to what I know is true, what I know is right, what I know is noble, and I focus on those things, whatever they may be, and I kind of let the other stuff fall away. Now, listen, going back to our original kind of hell discussion, I don't want anyone to go to hell. I don't even want my worst enemy. I know I made fun of Coach K, and rightfully so. It's easy to do. I know this is going to shock people. I don't even want him to go to hell. I've never met the man. I really don't. I don't want him to go to hell. I don't want anyone to go to hell. I don't. The sad part is that there is a choice that comes with that. Either you're with Jesus or you're not. And I think that's what it boils down to for me. And so that's what motivates me every day to get up, is to use my voice, use my influence, use whatever God-given analogies that may come my way to love someone enough to say, listen, I love you enough to do this. I'll share just one quick story. And this just happened recently. Is we had a gentleman come into my body shop where I work at. He's using Google Translate because he can't speak English. And he's just going back and forth with his phone. So like I'm typing, he's typing, and we're like passing the phone back and forth kind of thing. And I'm telling him what's going on with the car and how we're going to have it longer and all this stuff. And he starts weeping, like literally weeping. And I'm like, why are you weeping? And I said, I didn't want to be rude, but I'm like, are you crying right now? And he writes back on his phone. He said, yeah. He said, I don't understand why you're being so nice to me. And he said, I've lived in the United States for 1.5 years now, and you're the first person that's ever been nice to me. I was like, what?
Dang.
And I wrote back, I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm from China, and I get a lot of racially profiled, and people are mean to me because of COVID. I'm like, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. If that's happening, stop it. Knock it off. That's not okay. Don't do that. Be a good human being. So anyway, we go back and forth, and it's a really hot day, by the way, this day as we're interacting. And he needs a ride someplace. And I offered him a ride because it was really hot, and he didn't take it. And I've read in certain cultures, especially Asian cultures, they're very prideful people. Like they want to do it themselves. And I forgot that. He wanted to walk to Costco of all places. And I said, well, let me just give you a ride. And he went, no. And again, he's crying more and more as our conversation continues. And finally, he just said, I want to walk. And I said, well, if you're going to walk, let me at least give you some water. And he said, what? And I said, I want to give you a bottle of water to take with you. So I went in my fridge and work and grabbed him some water and brought it to him. And now he's really crying. And he said, I still don't understand why you're being so nice to me. And I said, well, let me tell you something. And this is really hard because I can't use my words. I have to use my texting words, and they're not very good sometimes because I have dyslexia and I hate writing and I'm a verbal person. So God was really stretching me here in this moment. But I said, man, I'm doing this because God calls me to love people. You make sense of that or understand that, again, talking different languages like we were just talking about. But I'm called to love you, and I want to love you by giving you this water. It's not much. And he's crying, and he's like, again, you're the nicest person that I've met since I've come to the United States. Why did it take a guy at a body shop to be nice to him? Where's the other 20 people that should have been nice to him? Your response to that?
No, it's a very nice story. Not to put a boot through it. How does it make you feel when someone who doesn't believe in God feels compelled to show the same kind of love without being told to?
I'm excited by that. I think love comes from God. What do you think of that?
Right. It sounds like you're saying essentially that when we express the love that's been placed in us as human beings, by whatever means we channel that we are experiencing God. And by virtue of seeing that as something worth enacting, that's an act of belief, whether or not you attribute it to God through your imperfect syntax.
I think love comes from God. I think there is no love outside of God.
Okay, so then basically people experience the traits of God, whether or not they've invited him in or said that they believe his call to do those things. So then at the end of the day, is belief a necessary predecessor to enacting the virtues that Christianity is about?
Yeah, I think you still have to have belief
in order to do those things entirely right.
I'll give you an example. You have a dad. I have a dad. Our dads gave us certain traits about us. I don't know what yours are.
Very much so.
But I know my dad gave me mine. All right. There's some traits that I don't love that he gave me. Just there's some traits that he gave me that I really do like. Some of them I really enjoy. Love to me feels like a trait from God, the creator, which again, I think your dad was the creator of you. Your mom helped too. She was there.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
I think that to me is what love's about, is it's a trait that's been given to us by God, creator God, Yahweh, Abba, the divine, hummingbird. I don't know about that. The divine. I think that's what love is. Love is that expression of him coming out in us, just like our traits that our dad gave us, like I was just saying. I can accept that trait that he gave me, or I can deny it. I can say, well, no, that's me. I did that. I'm loving there. I truly believe God prompted me in that moment to say, go give that man a water. I really believe that in my heart of hearts. And my heart of hearts did not have time for this guy. Like, I didn't want to talk to him. I don't want to pass your phone back and forth, bud. Like, that's not me. I want to talk to you. I want to have a conversation. Like, this back and forth thing is dumb. It's stupid. Like, learn English. Like, these are the things that I'm thinking about, which are not of God, in my opinion. Being selfish, not of God. I could have said, that's my water. I bought it. He didn't buy it. A human being to human being, where does that come from? That doesn't come from me meditating, thinking, well, gosh, how can I use my water today to bless somebody? Nothing like that. Because let me tell you, I am very selfish by nature. My wife told you that a couple episodes back. You know, I'm selfish by nature. I have to fight against that. Your response to that?
Yeah. So that is something that I did a little thesis on in the middle of this book, kind of. And it's something I still wrestle with, is we as humans have this craving to sort of be selfless, but never totally selfless, where we recognize a certain type of sacrificial love makes sense to that collective herd self that we are just as wired toward as the individual self. We can expand that to our community. And then when someone goes even beyond that, that's like heroic. It's like, wow, like you see yourself in your fellow human no matter what. There's that level where it's natural. I've always sort of looked for, is there a line where it's so selfless that it goes against anything that natural selection could explain, and that could only be imparted by a sovereign deity? For a while, my answer was, well, Jesus. But then you see there's other people who sacrifice themselves for causes I don't believe in. That threw in a whole new issue. My theology through my 20s, when I was still very troubled by the things that always troubled me, looking to give an explanation that gave Christianity some practicality, was, you know, I wanted there to be that sense of God has laid it on my heart to do this. The Holy Spirit is the divine compass, showing me exactly what I need to do. And that at least felt like a cohesive structure of belief, where even if I don't intellectually make sense of certain things, I'm going to humble myself, live as if I believe it long enough that this spiritual force I've been promised is going to indwell me and guide my every step. So all of a sudden, it will be clear enough what I need to do. I just need to be brave enough to do it. The structure was entirely there, and I could do that, except everything I ever felt ultimately was just me wanting to part of the community, to be a human, to feel the love that I already felt. It wasn't coming from any more outside of me than love, I think, always did. Then it just became a matter of, well, yeah, so this belief system does give me some good moral prerogatives. That's where it all came back to, is there potentially any negative or any hindrance being created by it that offsets the positive that I'm saying maybe comes from that? And the negative was both my experience that I wouldn't want anyone to have to repeat, mostly a psychological experience. Again, you like you said, this is a normal church upbringing I'm describing, the way that I received it. If we pin anything on the divine mystery that's been revealed to us, we can't really argue with someone else's divine mystery that's been revealed to them through a different holy book or whatever it may be, except to say, well, I'm saying I had this experience, you're saying you had this experience, may they never meet.
The idea of truth, and where is the truth, and who has the truth, and who has the right truth. I've sat with LDS folks. I've sat with Muslims. I haven't sat with any Jehovah's Witnesses yet. So if you're listening to Jehovah's Witness, give me a call.
I've talked to a couple. I'll send them your way.
Truly, I want to have that conversation. I'm enamored with why we believe what we believe. I've always been. When we had a guy on Waco, was right next to David Koresh. That's fascinating to me. But I think that's the impasse that we're at, is where is the truth at? One of my favorite bands of all time, DC Talk, says the truth is out there. But where? Where is it at? Who has it? I mean, I almost feel like it's this giant Easter egg hunt. Like we're hunting around looking for these truth eggs. Is it there? Is that real? Is that not? And I think that's what also in my creative mind's eye, if you will, thought about this series is like, Where is the truth? Who has it? And maybe it's time to unveil said truth. I'm struggling on some levels because I feel like there's so many people that feel like they have quote unquote the truth and this is where it is and come see it and come get it and come eat it up and lap it up. And then you get there and you realize you're lapping up sand. And you're like, what?
Well, your Easter egg analogy is spot on. That's exactly what people are doing. To me, the most real experience is the one you share with another person and you leave doctrine out of it. The Easter egg nugget of truth mentality is what I was trying to get away from. To me, that's when I say religion, that's what I'm talking about. And I think there are people who practice Christianity or maybe other faiths in a way that isn't necessarily that. So I want to be clear, like my book and my general platform, if you will, is not to dissuade somebody from a belief that's totally sincere or to bash Christianity, because I do think there's a way of practicing it as an experience. You're supposed to be humbled before the divine. And so that should be some kind of experience. I just think it's all too common that people are trying to collect the tokens and cash them in, or even if they're not, doing it for some kind of twisted personal gain, that just that mindset really limits the way that they live their life.
I feel like so many people out there are hunting and searching and they have these things that they're holding on to that they've been hiding. Maybe, and again, when I say hiding, that almost seems like a scary thing or they're being disingenuous. And that's not what I mean. I just think there's so many people out there that are so afraid to step out of whatever it is that they're afraid of. That maybe this is the series to say, you know what, it's time to step into the light. How can folks find out more about you, what you're about? Where can they go and get the book? All those fun stuff.
Yeah, the book is on Amazon, both in paperback, ebook. It's also on Spotify, under my name, Matt Garnier, and it is read by Snoop Dogg, a robot version of Snoop Dogg on Spotify. But I don't think you'll get very far in that. It's not easy listening. The robots still have not surpassed what a human can do by my estimation. I'm on YouTube, Matt Garnier, if you want to see the other side of me that's hopefully not as long-winded and serious.
So you had Snoop Dogg read your book?
Basically used one of those automated readers, where you could pick like English, Australian.
Always Australian.
Or Snoop Dogg. And of course I picked Snoop Dogg.
Matt, I don't know how old you are in comparison to me. You don't have to say if you don't want
I'm 32.
Okay.
No, I hold nothing back.
You're 32. So being your elder here, I'm just going to help you because, you were so probably nervous. You probably forgot one other place that folks can go and get your book. It's okay. I mean, you're nervous. It's fine. There is one more place that you forgot though. Do you want me to help you out with that since you're so young and fragile?
Yeah. Please enlighten me.
All right. So it's going to also be at opspodcast.com under books that we love up towards the top, not the tippy top, but up towards the top, right beneath Roy Williams, Dean Smith's book. We can't have anybody take the top spot from those two books.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to even be in such company.
I feel like I need to even get Hubert Davis's book up there. Somebody told me he wrote a book and I need to put his book on my site. And so I got to look into that. So with that being said, it's time for some silliness. You up for some silliness?
I guess I could let a little.
I don't have any dad jokes standing by. I should also probably have that. In light of you being in North Carolina, it's kind of ironic maybe that I have this North Carolina cup.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence, right? Your booking agent did not tell you to bring a cup to the interview, did they? I
always do.
You brought a teacup.
I got a mug.
You got a mug,
yeah.
But no dye in the mug, I'm guessing? No?
No dye?
Color? like a dye, like a rolling dye. No, I don't have
like a Yahtzee situation.
No Yahtzee here. Okay, so we're going to roll for something today. So anyway, we're going to do senseless into the show. We like to do this silly thing called senseless. So here it is. There are these 6 questions and they're brand new. Every season I've committed, which my wife is not a fan of. She thinks it's silly to do new questions. She liked the original. She's like, go back to what worked. I was like, you know what? New season, we're going to do new questions every time. Every new season, we're going to do new questions. So these are specially created for season 14, special questions. Random sense-like questions. Shaking it up really good.
Do I have to give lightning fast responses?
I mean, not necessarily.
I'm a writer. I speak slowly.
So there you go. I know it's the North Carolina logo, but it represents the number 1.
Of course it is.
There's a number 3 that's also.
Oh, wow.
All right. Number 1 is this. One person, only one person you miss right now and why?
I'll just say one of my homies back in Northern Virginia from the old church days. There's actually a few of them. Those guys get me better than anyone else. When I'm in a bad spot, it's like they're the guys that I can talk to who actually I know have felt almost identically. Not just this like distant sympathy. It's like empathy.
What would you say to him right now? You have a moment?
You might have found the question I won't answer. I said you wouldn't.
Well, I just thought, if they ever hear this back.
Yeah, it's true.
This last year, I had a very near and dear friend of mine. By the way, she's a Duke fan. She was a Duke fan. And her name's Tina, and she died of ALS. So we always had this Duke, North Carolina rivalry. Sorry.
Yeah,
The day she died, I kid you not, I'm watching Duke, Tennessee, and Tennessee is destroying Duke. And I am so excited because North Carolina didn't make the tournament this year, so I was rooting on any team that was playing Duke. They were my favorite team. And in this moment, it was Tennessee, and I was cheering hard. I was a Volunteers fan. Got my phone next to me, goes off, and I kind of dismiss it because, I'm watching the game, in the middle of the game. And I finally looked down, and it was my mom text me saying that Tina had died. And then the Duke game ended, and Duke lost. And I thought, I'm never, ever going to be able to have the moment or the opportunity to rub it in her face that Duke lost again. And so that's why I asked that question, because you never know when the moment is going to be gone. So again, I'm not putting that pressure on you, but
no, that's a very real pressure that I do place on myself all the time, especially when I've left somebody checked in like I would like to in a while. Again, those are probably just things I have to say straight to them. Good reminder, though.
Well, that's all it was. So, Matt, I just want to say, man, I don't know if anybody got anything out of what we talked about today. Truly, I don't know. Going to leave it up to the listeners and find out what they liked and what they didn't like. Man, I just want to say thanks for giving me some moments today. Really appreciate you hanging out with us and giving us some moments. So thank you for that.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that, too.
Well, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, that is it. That is all. That's our show today. Listen, I don't know. Is that a debate? I'm going to let you choose that. That's your choice, whether you want to choose to believe that or not. I don't know what you make of that. That's the first time I feel like we've ever really had the push back and forth. I don't ever remember that happening. Somebody will have to check the archives. We'll get research on that. We hired them back again after COVID. Not working from home anymore. They're doing some research for us. But I'm serious about this. Like, let's take a minute and just take a breath. Wow. I remember as a kid playing with Lincoln Logs. I'm dating myself. And I remember one time in particular, I had made something and I was kind of proud of it because I'm not a Lincoln Log guy. I'm not a Lego guy. I'm not a model guy. A couple of years ago, I put together a Boba Fett. I got from China from eBay. I was really excited about it because I put it together all by myself and it required some glue. But back to my Lincoln Log story. I was so excited and my G.I. Joes were playing in the Lincoln Logs and my brother came through and kicked it over, destroyed it. I was just pissed. That's right, I said pissed. I can say it, it's my show. And I remember thinking, man, it took forever to build that. Do you not realize how long that took to build? And I guess that's what I want to ask you and relate back to you. Is maybe there's something in your life that was built around you and something came along and destroyed it. And maybe at the time you thought, now what? I'm really mad, really angry. What are you going to do with it? So maybe there's something in your life right now that needs to be just destroyed, broken down, gotten rid of. But I want to know this. If that's you, let me know. Love to know. OPSpodcast.com is a great place to let me know. You can also let us know on the socials. OPS Podcast Show, a little different than the website. You can let us know there. Let me know. Maybe it's time to kind of deconstruct some stuff. Those ideas that we've always had. Get rid of them. It's a new season. For us, at least. Maybe it can be a new season for you as well. Again, before I let you go, do not forget, do not ever forget this. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned until next week when we walk in other people's shoes.